Hey guys, welcome back to Pinnacle Poisons. Scott here. And beginning of the weekend again, thank goodness. I'm here to have a drink and to share a drink with you. So go ahead and kick back, relax, and poison a choice today. High West Whiskey American Prairie Bourbon. Now, to go along with tasting and a review of this, I actually had a really good friend of mine, Jordan Fraley from Life Streamed, and I'll have a link either in the description or somewhere you can click. I'm still a little new to this. That way you all can go and take a look at his videos. He's actually a really good childhood friend of mine that he's been on YouTube for years. And he had a question for me. The question is, how does someone start tasting bourbon? I mean, obviously you drink it, duh, but how do you do what I do, for example? How do you taste and review and actually enjoy a whiskey to where you can pick out the flavor notes on it or the nosing notes or the finish? And that's a good question because quite honestly, you think modern day times now, most people, their first experience of drinking any form of alcohol is either one, when they finally turn 21, so they're in college, and they went to a random college party probably. Or two, someone out there has probably stolen it from their parents' liquor cabinet at some point and never did it again until they got way older, until they turned 21 and had that college party then. So on and so forth. You get the point. So, oh well. How to do a tasting is a really great question. I've learned from a number of sources, some reading sources, some actual YouTube sources. One of my favorite YouTube sources is actually from the Whiskey Tribe. I've watched them for years. They do a lot of great tasting reviews on bourbons and different forms of whiskeys. But here is my 101 take of doing any form of tasting for a bourbon, a whiskey, blended, a scotch. This is for the generics of just the whiskey brands. There is a difference in techniques for tasting other forms of alcohol, such as wine. And that's due to the chemical process of how to bring out the better flavors of wine. So, my little 101 tasting guide for alcohol is strictly going to be for whiskeys. One day, I do have plans on probably expanding the channel and doing more poisons of different particular drinks. Say your poison is wine. I'll start doing reviews of it and tastings of it. Or say your poison is, I don't know, coffee. We might do coffee reviews one day. Sky's the limit, really, depending on what your poison is, as long as it's legal. And that's where your suggestions come in. In the comments down below, what next poison choice would you all like me to try? Would you like, say, a wine, or a tequila, a vodka, or even a coffee? I really don't mind. I partake in all of those. That's great with me. Just keep it legal, because I'm not going to do anything that's illegal, obviously. I'm just not that kind of person, so if you're looking for that kind of thing, there are other channels. Sorry, guys. Start of a tasting is actually with the glassware. For me, I choose a tulip-shaped glass. The reason being is actually the bulb. For a tasting of bourbon and different forms of whiskey, whether you're a Scotch drinker, Canadian whiskey drinker, or any form of whiskey drinker, I usually will suggest a tasting in a tulip-shaped glass. The reason being is that the tulip shape actually allows for when the whiskey is in the drink, in the glass, the really strong alcohol fumes will actually evaporate quicker than what the nose sense that you're wanting to nose is in the whiskey is going to evaporate later. So the whiskey notes that you're looking for when you do a nosing is actually getting trapped in the bulb, whereas the pure alcohol scents are escaping the glass sooner. So that is the reason why you'll see people when they do a whiskey tasting actually use a tulip-shaped glass or a glass known as a Glencairn. And Glencairns are much smaller than my tulip-shaped glass. This was just something that I could find easily. I've never actually found a Glencairn sold locally. I need to order some online so I can use them officially. But I honestly like my tulip-shaped glasses. They're perfectly fine. And I also like the fact that they have a stem. The reason why I enjoy having the stem in the base is because when you do a tasting for bourbon or any other form of whiskey, the actual heat and temperature of the bourbon and whiskeys are going to alter the flavor. So if you have your hand holding on to the glass that is in contact with the whiskey, you're actually going to warm up that whiskey slowly, and it's going to slowly alter in flavor. And same goes for cold. If the general rule is, say for example, you threw your whiskey into the refrigerator or into the freezer, you're actually going to suppress some of the flavor notes that you would find in that whiskey until it warm up. So the best example I can give you of that is actually a Johnny Walker special edition that they did during the Game of Thrones days. You gotta remember those, the Game of Thrones eras of Johnny Walker. So this was the White Walker blend that they did, where they actually, if you read the bottle, told you to freeze the bottle or throw it in the refrigerator, and as it warmed, it would expand in flavor notes. And I personally really enjoyed that. I loved the evolution of flavors that I just kept on going back and back for to find in that whiskey. So temperature is a big deal. Hence the reason I choose a stem tulip glass so that I can control the temperature of my whiskey a little better. Now this one has a little bit of a very wide rim mouth, which is reminiscent to, say, a rocks glass. So I'm actually evaporating more fumes than I want. It's good to evaporate the alcohol fumes sooner, but it would be nice if this was a little bit more closed in so that I would trap in more of the scents that I want to nose to figure out when I'm doing a tasting for any sort of whiskey. Now, besides glassware, and there are other glasses, and eventually I might do a video about the different types of glasses. I've got a couple of different types for whiskey drinking and different cocktail glasses. We might do an experiment to see how that works out. But beyond that, this is a tasting 101. So, after figuring out what glassware you're going to use, if you don't have a tulip-shaped glass, well, your best bet's probably a wine glass. That would be the closest shape that you could get that would help you out doing nosing. If you can't find something tulip-shaped, I would choose a wine glass. That would be your best substitute. After figuring out your glassware and having your whiskey poured, I always do visual review in some instance. So for High West whiskey, take a look at the actual color. That is a nice amber color. And it's not cloudy. It's actually pretty opaque. It's a little bit of golden depending on the light. You can see a little bit of the separation of alcohol to the rest of the drink. Almost like there's an oil level writing on top of the rest of it, so this whiskey might be a little bit more oily, but we'll have to see. Now, for an actual nosing, you'll see different techniques, and here is the most basic one I can give you. When you go in for a nosing, you're of course going to come up and bring the glass up to your face and up to your nose. Some people will go full frontal and stick their nose deep into the glass. Now, people that stick their nose deep into the glass are obviously really used to drinking bourbons and whiskeys. The high alcohol fumes are not going to bother their nose as much as, say, a normal person. So they're digging in deep so they can get in as many nosing scents as they can. For a regular person, here's what you need to do. You're going to have your mouth partially opened, and you're going to stick your nose into the glass to do a little bit of a nosing. If you smell or feel a sharpness while you're doing a nosing, you've gone too far in deep, back up, say, a centimeter. That way you don't have as many alcohol fumes actually invading your nose and into the top of your palate, so that you can resist the alcohol fumes. Because what you did was just you inhaled alcohol fumes, and that can be an irritant. It's not pleasant. The reason why I say open your mouth while you're doing a nosing is because what you're doing when you do that is that you're actually containing the scents, going through a cycle of air. When you sniff through your nose, it'll go into your mouth as well, and you can inhale, and those scents will invade the top of your palate and go into your nasal structure up in the top. And that's the most basic way you can do that for a nosing. And that's how I do mine a lot of times. However, sometimes that's going to change. You might have sinus problems that day, and half your nose is going to be a little bit more clogged up. So you might do a nosing on one side of the nose more than, say, the other side. Or, I don't know, you might try shutting your mouth and see if you can enhance the flavors or the nosing notes that way. It really is up in the air on what works for you, because when you do a nosing or any form of a tasting, you're going to have to realize that no matter what you do, you're technically not doing it wrong, because you might discover a flavor note or a descriptor that you could not have found any other way. If you're having trouble smelling a whiskey because of you have like a scent trapped in your nose, there actually is a trick to get rid of that trapped scent, and that is making your nose go back and reset to zero. The way you do that is actually sniffing your own skin, because what is the most natural scent that you smell all the time that you don't ever really think about? And that's you. So what you need to do to reset your nose and your sense of smell back to zero and neutral is actually just smell your arm. Okay? Smell your arm. I know it might look weird, but do that. Your sense of smell will reset to zero, and you can do an actual nosing, and you can catch a few things that you didn't catch before. Now, on my little notebook that you usually see me with, I do have nosing notes, tasting notes, and finishing notes for High West whiskey. High West whiskey is a 46% alcohol drink, 92 proof. Really nice. And what I like about going onto their website and them providing these notes that they have for their company is that I can compare their notes to what I'm actually physically reacting to when I do a tasting of any sort. And that helps me learn what particular scents and descriptors I am finding. I mean, you can do it without the notes, But sometimes if you don't have that particular experience of smelling a certain scent or a taste for a certain taste, then you just might come up with a blank. And sometimes it's hard to come up with the proper descriptors. And a little bit of a guide will help that flavor note or that nose note just pop in the mind. So say, for example, the nose notes that they had for this was light caramel plus vanilla. So if I do a little nosing of this, here's honest review. I can definitely smell the light salted caramel. I don't smell as much vanilla. It's there, but it's subtle note. And that might honestly be because I have a wide mouth tulip glass and some of those nosing notes have already evaporated some. I have described this process a little bit to you, so a little bit of that might be gone already. Now, the next bit is actually the tasting. My technique for this, for the initial tasting, is something that I got off of different researches and even the Whiskey Tribe. And they suggest that for the first sip, honestly, for your tongue and palate, just take a little tiny sip, like that of sipping, say, a hot drink. And just that little sip, just drink that right away. Okay, and go from that. My initial tasting for that is, it's rich. I get a little bit of a sourness. Kind of like sour grass. I mean, I do a lot of yard work and I've been out in nature plenty of times. You know, occasionally you'll get this vegetation that you'll cut or whatever, like cutting the lawn, and a bit of grass or something may fly into your mouth if you weren't paying attention. It has happened. Other yard workers out there, you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes it's a little sour and it's a little bitter. I get a little bit of that. Now, I'm going to compare with my tasting notes here from their website, and I'm going to see what I'm finding. Their initial tasting notes on here is rich and earthy, balanced with candy corn, honey nougat, and sweet corn bread biscuits. I mean, from my initial, just my little sip, I didn't find a whole lot of that. I found the richness, and the earthiness is probably the sour and the bitterness that I initially tasted. But I'm going to go ahead and taste again, and this time I'm going to actually pause for a minute and think about what I'm tasting in comparison to the notes that I found and see if I can find all that. You might swish it in your mouth. You might hold it in your mouth. You might just continually drink the drink and slowly pick it apart. There's not really a wrong answer when you do a tasting. And don't ever think that some whiskey snob out there knows better than you. They really don't. When you do a tasting, it's very subjective to your own experiences. And the only way you're going to gain more experience doing a whiskey testing is to taste more whiskey and to taste new flavors out there in the world. Because you're comparing a whiskey taste to other things that are relatable to you. So after my second tasting, I still taste the rich and the earthy sourness that I got before. I'm still not getting as much sweet as, say, a candy corn. My second tasting of that showed a little bit of taste of sugar, but I wouldn't go as far as corn. I don't even taste biscuits. I get a little bit of a subtle sweetness, but it's more of an herbal sweetness for me. And that's my particular taste. That's going to be different for the guy next door or the lady down the street. There's no telling what they're going to get out of this for sure. You can get an average tasting, however, and that's what distilleries are looking for when they're doing taste reviews with their master distiller. They have very refined taste palates, and they can usually figure out what the average taste palate is going to be. Now, for all I know, my palate tasting of this whiskey is being altered depending on what I had for dinner. I mean, I had fish for dinner. So I don't know if that residual palate flavor is actually altering the taste of my drink. It could. I have no clue. And you'll soon find out that there are other things that you can do to a whiskey to make it taste even different. We've already talked about temperature. Another thing you do is actually add a little bit of water. You can get yourself a little dropper, and you can just drop little tiny bits of water in there, and the water reacting to the whiskey being watered down will actually sometimes extract more flavors, or it'll do the complete opposite and suppress flavors. You really don't know until you try. Usually, you'll find the most change, in my opinion, in an oily whiskey. And I can't think of an example of an oily whiskey off the top of my head. Not this. Even though it does look like there is an oil layer there, it doesn't taste oily to me, so this is not an example of that. Yeah, I can't. Off the top of my head, I can't think of an oily whiskey right now. I know I've had some, but I can't think of it right now. But that's beyond the point. So there's a lot of things to alter with this. You could add a cube of ice. The fact that you added frozen water to that is lowering the temperature and adding water to dilution, but a slower dilution. So you're changing the flavor in two factors at that point by lowering the temperature and diluting it slowly. And it's going to slowly get more diluted as time goes by. And even as the drink is evaporating, the drink is going to change in flavor depending on how long it sits in the glass in open air. You really are going to have a different experience when you do a whiskey tasting every single time. And quite honestly, if you're going to be really invested on tasting a particular whiskey that you really enjoy, do it the service and do yourself the service of exploring how far you can take that. Does it taste better with a little bit, a couple of drops of water, like 3 drops from an eyedropper? Or say it tastes better when it's refrigerated, or does it taste better when it's frozen? Who knows? That's for us to find out and to review. If you do like the idea of me doing those forms of tastings, I don't mind doing them. They're just a little bit more involved and a little bit more lengthy. And maybe I'll do that for some of my most favorite whiskeys, and maybe you all will put down in the comments whiskeys you'd like to see that happen to. So, from what I have found in the taste of this, I found the rich and the earthiness, a little bit of sour, a little bit of bitter, and there's a little bit of a subtle sweetness, but it's more of an herbal sweet for me. Now for the finish. The finish on their notes was vanilla with a hint of caramel apple. Now I've already taken 2 drinks of this, so I kind of already have an idea what the finish tastes for me, but I'm going to go ahead and take a 3rd sip and we'll see where we go from there. I don't get the caramel apple. I still get the light caramel in the taste. And I had caramel in the nose, but I'm not getting caramel in the finish. The finish, as I'm sitting here talking about it, is slowly changing into more of a vanilla note for me. And that's for me. For me, a lot of times a whiskey is going to bring out vanilla notes for me. And that's something that's just easy for my mind to grasp for whatever reason. It's something that I enjoy many times. And it's one of the most common flavors that you'll find in whiskeys. Whiskeys, bourbons, whatever. And it could be depending on the type of whiskey that you have. I haven't actually talked about High West bourbon or High West whiskey too much as yet. This is the, as we stated before, the American Prairie Bourbon. And we just did a full tasting of it. So, congratulations. You did your first 101 tasting with me, and maybe I can refine this process a little easier for everyone later. But this particular glass is really nice to the extent that this is actually a blended whiskey drink. So if you want to find out more details about what particular blends went into this bottle, they actually direct you to their website. Their website being highwest.com or americanprairiebourbon.com. This is actually a drink out in the Midwest itself. And what was really nice about this particular drink is that 10% of their profits after taxes go into the American Prairie Reserve that in northeastern Montana, and to help support that foundation, which is really cool. I really do support preserving the natural world. As you get to know me, that's going to be something that you'll realize I do want to help preserve the world the best that I can. And it's really cool to see somebody and some company out there doing the same thing. I always like finding information and history of a bottle really intriguing. And sometimes subjectively that might alter my tasting and my experience for a drink. So, for example, when I had first tasted High West and had no knowledge of what it was, I did not read the label or anything like that. I just had a drink of it. The only experience that I can really recall from that time ago was just the sour and the bitter, and that was from my experience of the drink being earthy for me. And that was doing the drink an injustice. So I'm really glad to have come back and explored this drink more. It's a lot better than my first experience. But I also have grown as a whiskey drinker. Do not expect yourself to be an expert taster of whiskey, bourbon, Canadian whiskey, or vodka, gin, tequila, rum, any sort of alcohol drink right away. It's going to take research. It's going to take time to develop your palate. And there's a lot of things involved. You're going to have to find resources that don't judge you. And this is one of them. If you ever have a question, by all means, put it in the comments. Send me a message. I do have a Facebook, and I'll put that link down in the description. Direct message me. I don't mind answering questions. That is perfectly fine. So, here's your Whiskey 101. High West, thank you for being the experimental teaching lesson for our channel, for Pinnacle Poisons. We appreciate it. This is a non-sponsorship. This is just a thank you, since this just so happened to be the drink in which I'm doing a 101 lesson. And with that, quite honestly, the world's tough enough. Thank goodness it's the weekend. And have a drink. Share a drink with your friends. May you have a good one. Cheers.